To me, that vision is about some big acquisitions like Whoop or Calm, maybe both. Right-sizing the retail footprint, to your point, moving more of their sales online, and then also some of these adjacent spaces like travel wear. To me, that bundled up as an overall strategy, a really bold strategy with some numbers behind it, could be the thing that gets the company back focused on what it should be and not focused on what it's not accomplishing. Hey Steve, welcome back.
What's going on, Ian?
You cold? Is the heat broken in your house or something? What's going on? Why are you wearing a hat?
I'm all geared up for the company of the day. So before I give the hint, how are things? Did you not just get back from your away or something? Or
I'm literally supposed to leave tomorrow, and we've got like this record, snowfall. So I have no idea what's going to happen with that flight.
how about if I send a couple of snowmobiles your way?
Sounds good. Sounds good.
So we just got back. We were in. I think we mentioned last time we were in Tulum for a few days for our friend's 50th. Fun place. Anybody that hasn't been to Tulum, Mexico, highly recommend. And particularly go see the Mayan ruins. I think now it's been categorized one of the 7 wonders of the world. I love history, architecture. I went to school for that. So it was right up my alley. So learned a ton. And probably not a good time to live during then because you were...
Yeah, you don't want
There's a lot of
sacrificed.
sacrifices going on. Yeah. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm a pretty good runner, but I'm not that fast. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'd be one of the sacrifices.
Well, I'm not sure we vacation the same, Steve. I don't go to a lot of ruins. I just, Anyways.
Listen. I got to ask you a question. Which lemon of a company are we going to turn into lemonade?
Oh, very nice, very nice. And
Listen,
the logo,
I can't take credit for that. That is my beautiful wife. She gave me that one. I'm inspired by the last time you did it, where you came all decked out for the Hallmark one. So I thought, you know what, I'm gonna get all decked out in my gear. So anyway,
any excuse for a costume. Can we just institute a costume policy every episode? We have to start with a costume. All right.
100%.
Let's jump into it. I'm gonna share my screen because this one I think is important to get some visuals, and I'll try to do my best to explain it for those people who are joining only via audio. But as you have probably guessed, we are talking about Lululemon. And why do we say it's a lemon? Well, first let's talk about the market that it's in. The athleisure market overall, and that includes Lululemon, but it also includes all of those direct competitors who sort of came out of the woodwork after Lululemon set the trend. So I'm talking about Fabletics, Vuori, or however you pronounce it, Alo. There's a bunch of them, and it seems to be a new one every single day, but the market is definitely growing, and it's projected to be all the way up at $700 billion by 2030. So this is a massive trend that was partly also driven by COVID. And when everyone was at home, we all wanted to be comfortable.
Yeah, it's Lululemon was category defining. They redefined how people looked at yoga and what you wore. And these folks are really a category defining organization. And you're right. I think that COVID threw gasoline on this that was already a growing category. So, but it's gotten tight. Gotten crowded.
So let's talk about Lululemon specifically. Lululemon's a really interesting case because they're in this growing market. They actually created the market in a lot of ways, and they're actually doing fairly good financially. We'll look at that in a second. But their stock is taking a bath. They're down 47% year to date. That was as of Jan 12th I looked. They don't have a CEO right now, and they're in the middle of a proxy war between Chip Wilson, the founder. He's a controversial founder, and their main market, North America, is slowing significantly. So let's look at that. Their international growth is massive. 33% on a company that size is unbelievable. But America is their largest market, and where they were founded is actually down 2%. And so this is definitely one of the things between that and the proxy war that's having a massive impact on their overall stock performance and profit impact. EPS is actually down year over year, due to the America's drag. Let's look at that difference between financial performance and stock performance. Fiscal year 2024, which was the last time they provided a full year of performance, $10.6 billion in revenue. They had $2 billion cash on hand, and their international growth was 33%, as we saw in the previous slide. But the stock is down significantly while their revenue growth is still positive. And I would argue a large reason for this is this proxy war. People hate a company that's at war with itself. Those of you who don't really know what a proxy war is, it's when a founder or an activist seeks board control by soliciting votes from other shareholders, called a proxy fight, because the shareholders grant their voting rights proxies to one side or the other. So it's either the board stays or the founder stays. And there's been a few famous examples of this. And again, it's a winner-take-all situation. If Chip wins, the board is out, and if the board wins, Chip is pretty much out. He's pretty much lost all his power.
Except for he still is the largest shareholder.
He still owns 8.4%.
Not that gives him control over. I get it, but
right, he's going to lose significant control. They can't necessarily force him to sell his shares, but he's going to be like completely neutered,
or keep his mouth shut as he publicly speaks about the organization and goes on news programs and etc. So, he can be damaging in other ways.
Not to mention the cost, and proxy wars can be outrageously expensive. Gildan Athletics is a famous company that was involved in proxy war. They spent $77 million on a proxy war. Think about that waste and the distraction. Highly distracting. It's a binary outcome, and there's a massive reputation risk as well, because people tend to play dirty in these types of wars, like what happened with Rogers Media here in Canada. A lot of dirt is dragged out, and nobody wants that. It makes the company look bad. It makes all the key players look bad, and they get loss of confidence from both the market and often employees. And that binary outcome also can lead to leadership turnover, because depending on which horse senior leadership is backing, they'll often clean house after the outcome of a proxy war. So even if Chip isn't ousted because he owns 8.4%, those backing Chip on the leadership team could very well be ousted.
Yeah, I would argue that the binary outcome, I would argue that there really is no winners in one of these proxy wars. It's incredibly poor use of capital for an organization that's trying to stay incredibly competitive in a highly competitive market where they have new entries that are taking market share all the time. They're not seen as very innovative. I would argue too, one of the real damaging things that's happening as well is employee confidence, not just shareholder confidence, but I think there's a huge employee confidence. In fact, the last 5 years, the average tenure for a Lululemon employee now is 2 years. So, and that's not just retail. Like I get on the retail front where, yes, you're going to have a high turnover, but that is in the corporate office as well. So, and these are not just junior people, these are senior people as well. So they have a lot of people in the organization that are not staying loyal to the organization. And it's not surprising. I mean, this is now third CEO they're running through as well. So yeah, they've got some internal issues. It's actually similar to when we talked about Jaguar. I think that they've got probably more internal issues as well as external factors as well. But I think internally, I think they've got some real problems.
Absolutely. This is something they need to deal with as quickly as possible. It's the founder, Chip, versus the board. What is his leverage and what are his liabilities? And I think this is interesting. His leverage is that, like, to your point, he's the biggest independent shareholder. he does have credibility. He's an unmatched authority on brand culture and product vision. He is Lululemon in the eyes of many loyalists. He invented the athleisure category. I mean, he is a visionary in many ways, and visionaries can often be problematic. I mean, Steve Jobs wasn't, by all accounts, was not a very nice man. His current diagnosis is that the company has lost its innovative edge to financial engineering, and I think that's, from what I'm seeing, that seems relatively true. A lot of their recent releases, including their new shoe, was lackluster. They don't have the same edge they did, and I would argue in some ways they've lost their footing. His disadvantages, it's been reported that he's declined to engage with the board. And that statement, when you hear union fights and they'll say, well, they've walked away from the table, they're not willing, that doesn't play well to the market, and it doesn't play well to anybody who would theoretically support him.
Steve Jobs publicly was famous for berating employees, but I would argue that Jobs never disgraced, maybe is a good way to kind of put it, because I think the way Chip has publicly said things about his customers or his customer base and loyal customers. I'll give you one kind of story, a personal story. I actually met Chip a number of years ago as part of the marketing association that I was part of for a number of years, and had him at a fairly large conference as a keynote speaker, and everybody was pretty excited. Lululemon was pretty hot brand. By the way, we should all be really proud too. It's a Canadian brand, and it's a Canadian success story as well. Like, I think that's something that actually they don't talk enough about as well, personally. But Chip was a keynote speaker. So Chip arrives, he had his entourage. Unusually, his entourage was all young women. So fine. Headed to the stage to give his address and pulled out some crumpled paper from his pocket, and then went on a rant for like the better part of an hour and 20 minutes or something like that. I think he was only supposed to speak for 45 minutes, but nobody could get him off the stage because he just kept talking. But his rant was about just things like women's role in the workplace and how hard it is to hire them because they like to go on maternity leave. And like, this conference had probably 1,000 people at it. The number of women who got up and left, I was shocked. Like, I had no idea that this is what was going to transpire. So that was my first sort of introduction to Chip Wilson and sort of his opinions. And obviously he's been on the news other times as well, giving some pretty controversial comments about certain type of women or certain size women that just shouldn't be wearing his clothes. Like, again, there's one thing being controversial, like you mentioned Steve Jobs, and standing your ground with things, but Steve would never, as far as I can remember anyway, I never heard a story of him berating or disgracing a customer in any kind of way. Like, that just makes no sense to me whatsoever.
Absolutely. A lot of the things he said are completely indefensible. And if even half of the urban legends are true, it's unbelievable. He's one of the most controversial business leaders in history. The most interesting corollary to him was Dove Charney from American Apparel. Have you ever heard of the story of Dove Charney with American Apparel?
No.
So he had started American Apparel. He ended up in a proxy war himself. It actually ended up bankrupting the company, the proxy war. And Charney was defeated in that proxy fight. And he was sort of one of these visionary leaders as well. But he was embroiled in exact same thing. He always surrounded himself by young, attractive women. That was his entire staff. And he was, I actually saw a documentary. It was almost like a cult, and they engaged in like all kinds of sexual misconduct. Unbelievable. The proxy war ended the company effectively. Sort of the way that Chip's going if he doesn't sort of.
So again, I don't think there's any winners out of a proxy war. I mean, it doesn't matter which side wins. It's just there's no winners out of it as well. So, but I will say, just in defense of Chip a little bit, I think I think we're all in agreement, and lots of other analysts out there have agreed about sort of Chip's checkered sort of background and his controversial comments. I will say though, in terms of like, he does have a strong business sense, particularly within kind of the apparel. He's been in this business for a long time. He does have a strong sense that the organization has lost its culture, They've opened up probably far too many retail stores. They've moved from almost a religion is best way to sort of describe it originally, which is a great place for a brand. You form these loyal, diehard customers that are with you for life. He did such a wonderful job with that at the beginning. And I think just through the years and publicly traded and probably him off doing other things and no longer being the CEO and stepping down, just being called the founder, it really has kind of become a corporate engine. And you can see where it's lost a little of the soul. So he's right about that. It's just waging the proxy war. There's probably other ways that he could get the company back to kind of where it was in its heyday, or at least culturally get it back to that.
Right. And the last point here is that he's not providing a clear alternative, and that's sort of where I'd like to take the conversation is he needs a strategy. He needs something for people to rally behind. He's not proposing that he would become the CEO again. So hopefully he would avoid the PR missteps, but I agree with you. I think he's probably right about the direction. We talked about these companies. So Gildan, this was the company. In this case, the CEO was reinstated after 5 months and the entire board resigned, but it cost them $77 million. American Apparel, Dove was ousted by the board, but it was a complete scorched earth campaign, and the company followed a bankruptcy twice and was forced to liquidate. I mean, that's the worst outcome possible from a proxy war, and it has a lot of corollaries to this one. Unfortunately, the Rogers one, Edward Rogers won, but Chip doesn't have the dual class voting shares power that Edward Rogers did, so he's in a much weaker position that way. If we look at the stock performance, Lululemon down almost 50% year to date. On and Nike weren't doing great the last time I looked either, but nothing close to Lululemon. Amera Sports Inc. They own a bunch of sporting wear and performance clothing companies, and they're doing very well. So let's talk about the competitive landscape, because I think that's really interesting too, which is that, again, in a way, Lululemon created this athleisure category, and then all of these other competitors have rushed in. And I think they've done a good job at stealing share and being actually finding better niches than Lululemon. In a lot of ways, Lululemon is kind of just the mass athleisure overall. You've got Vuori, I don't know how you pronounce it, but
yeah, that's close enough.
Yeah, they have so half their customers, based on market research, half their customers also buy Lululemon products. They have about a $5 billion valuation based on their most recent funding round, and their threat is they're really strong with men, and so they're really stealing the men business in that sort of athleisure world versus Lululemon. The next one we're talking about, and there's a whole bunch of other ones. We're not going to talk about Fabletics and stuff, but Alo Yoga, this is the one I think is really interesting because they're like way more trendy. My wife just recently bought a bunch of Alo stuff. Crazy expensive, by the way more expensive than Lululemon. And they have a 63% customer overlap with Lululemon. And then on top of these really strong brands, they've just got this proliferation of cheap dupes on Amazon, where you can just buy pants at a third of the price on Amazon that basically look like Lululemon pants. Obviously, that's a massive threat in stealing a large portion of their sales. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of these competitors, Steve?
Yeah, I think the big thing that Lululemon truly is known for, other than kind of being the first to sort of really capitalize this, and originally it was yoga gear. I mean, the story was Chip was at a yoga retreat or yoga class or something, and he was looking around and going, why is everybody dressed like kind of slobs? Like it just, nobody likes to. And he spoke to the yoga instructor and said, look, if I could reinvent this, and the yoga instructor was absolutely, and they went into it. And after many different prototypes, they finally came out with the famous pants that you know about. But it was the quality that Chip was really about. And to the point, actually, the quality is so good that it's a little bit of once and done. And that's not totally true. Like people own lots of various different Lululemon, apparel, but it really is one of those things that you can have those pants for a long time. And what's happening is the other sort of entries into this market. Alo's kind of one of the sort of ones that gets talked about a lot because Uh, they tend to be a little more on the, call it the premium luxury side of things in terms of the style. And I would agree too. It actually really appeals to men. I own some Alo gear as well, and it really does. But the quality is different than Lululemon. It truly is. But the price point is still right up there. And I think that's one of the sort of common sort of misunderstandings with this is that Lululemon's quality is still superior. But what I think they're really struggling with is a little bit of that customer pace. Some of it has for sure because of chip, maybe, or just things going on in the market, have said, you know what, like I'm done with Lululemon. There's been some stories about, especially when Chip was out publicly making comments about, like not every woman is right for his clothes. Like there was women that wore those clothes that said, I will never wear Lululemon again, right? But I'm not sure that was like a huge defection from the Lulu brand. But I think what also happens is consumers are funny, as you know, being, both were in the market research business. Consumers are really, really funny, especially in the fashion industry. They tend to go to like once a brand becomes too big and like they're like, what's this new trend over here? What's this new thing over here? Like Aloe is an example of that, where you're starting to see it appear on I just got back from a plane ride and the guy right beside me, he was wearing Alo gear. It looked really comfortable, but very stylish at the same time, right? So you're starting to see it appear. And I was talking to him a little bit because I knew we had this podcast coming up, and he was like, he used to be a Lululemon guy, and which you don't hear that very often. But anyway, he used to be a Lululemon guy. And he's like, no, I switched to Alo just because I thought the style, and I kind of felt like Lululemon was getting sort of dated in its brand and things like that. So I think Lululemon is suffering a lot of that, and that's why a lot of these entries are sort of eating at their heels. But I do think that quality thing is something where Lululemon will eventually win back on, but I think there's other things they need to do as well. So, but the market is incredibly crowded. It really is. Like Lululemon was smart to start to move towards the Asia market and other places because they have saturated the U.S. market. All these other entries are saturating that market. It's going to be difficult to compete for sure.
The very last point I'll make on this slide is the only reason I put On Running on here was because they're just, as our first podcast episode, they're so innovative. Like that's the level of innovation that Lululemon should be striving for. They're
Agreed.
not in that category anymore.
And can we point out when you say innovation, Lululemon, they did an acquisition of a company called Mirror back in and around the pandemic because they were kind of getting this trend like the Peloton and saying, you know what, like everybody's going to be using these, home fitness equipment. And hey, why don't we, own the yoga gear, own the yoga screen, like own the whole thing. And then, as soon as the pandemic, people, ran back to the yoga studios and wanted to be interacting with people. Like that's the whole thing. It's a very community or communal thing, right? So, but that Mirror, was that being innovative or disruptive or trying to like they spent $500 million in that acquisition and 5 years later,
Yeah.
it was a $435 million write down. Like they lost money on this thing, right? Like not to mention all the sales and marketing they had to put into it to sell something nobody wanted, right? So
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know. I mean, it was innovative for sure. You can't argue that this is not an innovative product. I I would say that it was just a bad deal. They overpaid for something that hadn't proven demand, and this is another case of maybe they should have done a little bit more market research and really like dug. Maybe they did. I don't know. Maybe it was bad research. They should have used you or me. But
yeah,
to me, this just seems like it was just a bad deal. They just made a bad deal. They overpaid for an asset that the demand didn't exist, and they never figured out their product market fit, and just the whole thing just kind of collapsed. But that doesn't mean they shouldn't
wow.
still try to be innovative. It just this one didn't work, and they overpaid for it.
I think a little bit. I also will say I think a lot of these companies when they try to be because that's really becoming a trying to become a tech company, and I know they were acquiring the company and hopefully bring, but you and I both know, like organizations that their DNA is like, I've worked a lot with the bank, so have you. A bank is a bank. And as much as you try to make the culture into like a tech, and you can spin off different divisions, that it's a bank. It operates a bank. It is risk averse. I just don't think the culture, when you try to embed something else. So again, I'm not just saying they were trying to become a tech company. I just think that it was sort of failed from the start, where their product innovation comes from their clothing lines, and like they are an innovative company, but I to me it was a giant misstep. I think that was just a poor strategic decision.
Yeah, well, you can't argue it was a good decision. So I can't.
Well, and we're arguing it after the fact. I get it. Like,
Yeah,
or it's easy
yeah,
to
but
say,
I don't
post.
think that they personally. I don't think they should give up on a vision that includes some technology and data. I think that's not a bad strategy. I think some Nike's done not a terrible job with it. I don't know how profitable it is as of
Nike's,
yet.
but even the new
Yeah.
CEO has moved a lot away from that tech vision. Like, what was the last guy, Donahue, that was in the CEO chair? He really pushed, and then he retracted back from a lot of like the whole direct to consumer strategy that Nike had. It eroded away their wholesale like basically all the retailers they're working with because they're all pissed off that they were going there. So I was a huge fan of the Nike tech thing, but in the last I would say 2 or 3 years, you can hear that they're backing away from that and trying to get back to the core of who they are, right? So and what they are. And I think that's the missing piece that, and we both will agree to that with Lululemon, is that the core of who they are, that DNA that made them successful, they're grasping at straws when they start doing things like mirror. That's in my opinion. I agree with the data part of it. That to me is, I think, really important. I think any modern company has to have a good data strategy, which obviously is enabled by tech. Again, it's tech enablement, not selling tech to your customers.
Right. That's fair.
I
I
don't.
don't think they should be necessarily selling physical products like mirrors. But I do think tech enablement. But when a company does it right, like you and I both pivoted traditional market research companies into SaaS platforms, both successfully. We just talked about Hallmark in our last episode. Talk about a company that pivoted. I mean, they were a card company who became a media conglomerate.
Yep.
Unbelievable.
Yep.
And so it's absolutely possible, but you need that visionary leader. And I know that Chip wouldn't come back as CEO and they wouldn't want him to be CEO because of the PR things but he is a visionary. And this is going to come right down to the next part of this conversation, which is what does Lululemon do now?
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to ask the same question.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it boils down to two things: innovation, and that they need a clear innovation strategy and a vision, and they need to get out of this proxy.
Yeah, I agree with both those things. I think the big thing is what do you do in terms of the innovation or the product innovation part of it. The idea of how they've gone into some different markets, like the Asia market, and were successful with that. I actually think they're really good at defining categories or owning categories. We talked about that in the Hallmark thing, right? So, but I think Lululemon is really good at that. And if you look at Chip's history, he started a company called West Beach. That was one of his first sort of companies he started. And he kind of owned the category eventually around snowboarding, which was just an upcoming sport. It was just going to launch in the Olympics. And he did a really good job owning this category of sportswear for snowboarding. And what he did was he actually took surfing wear and kind of connected it. Made perfect sense, right? I actually think if they could look at categories. So I mentioned the flight I was just on coming back from Tulum, and so I don't know about you, but I get so tired of people showing up on planes and they look like they just rolled out of bed, like barely rolled out of bed. Like it's if I see one more furry pair of slippers on a like a 50-year-old adult, like I'm literally gonna throw them off the plane. Like, but I think you could probably own maybe like a global travel category. Like, get all decked out in Lululemon gear for your trip to whatever, Lisbon or wherever you're going. Like, I think there's something there. And again, I think you could actually get between men and women as well. I think you could actually potentially own that. So it's not just, for the yoga studio, or just hanging out on a Saturday, but you look decent. Like you actually look like you're in a casual form, but you don't look like a complete blob.
Like travel wear, kind of like that very dated brand Tilly. You know, like everywhere you go, there's like these sort of like 70-year-old people wearing like the Tilly travel
Yeah.
outfit. That, but
Yeah,
not
I
that.
think they
Yeah.
could own a category. Like, so when we talk about brand innovation, some of it could be just maybe just tweak the product into a different category and own a category that is could be a big growth category, right?
That makes
So
sense to me. Like
that
phone
that's little
pockets,
things that I would do. Yeah.
passport pockets, things that you don't have to take it out of your clothing to send it through the scanner.
You know what one
Yeah,
of their best sellers is? They have a fanny bag. I think it's for mainly for women, right? I don't know if it's a crossbody
I think you
bag or
could pull it
I
off.
don't know what it is, but
I think
anyway,
you could pull it
it's
off,
one of
Steve.
their best sellers,
Yeah.
right? Like, well, what are they wearing it for? In fact, my wife has one. Like, she swears by it, right? Again, I just think that tweak those things a little bit. Kind of back to what we talked about before. Like, I'm not sure that more colors and because like I mean they are kind of well known for they've got this really massive color palette. I'm not necessarily a fashion guru, but to me that doesn't feel really innovative. I think kind of back to what I was saying before about put Chip in a room. I think that guy's got a sensibility of market trends when it comes to this category and fashion in general. And he could probably, especially the sports, he owns a whole bunch of like he's on the board for a bunch of their sports apparel companies. Like he understands this market. Understand the fact that they're in Asia, they'll see trends before North America sees it as well. That's what they need to get back to, in my opinion, right?
I like that. I think that's great. I think I completely agree that that idea and that strategy, and I love the idea of travel wear because I think that's kind of what they are already, but they haven't leaned into it in a like open way, and there's big money there. I think ultimately the big burning platform is they've got to get out of this proxy war. It's a disaster. It's going to cost so much money. It's going to create such a distraction. It's going to like if they're down 2% now, if this proxy war drags on, they're going to be down 4% over before you know it, because they will have taken their eye off the ball. And so I think he's going about it the wrong way. I actually think Chip, to your point, I think Chip's right. I think they have lost their way in a lot of situations. The shoe launch was lackluster at best. They haven't kept up with Alo. They've lost men to Vuori. They're slipping, and they've made up for it with financial engineering and international growth because they don't have the same competitors in those markets, but they'll be there before you know it. And he can't just say you're doing a bad job and I don't like any of your choices for CEO. He needs to come with a strategy. That's the play for him. Is he needs to have a strategy. And if that strategy is we're going to pursue 3 new adjacent sports spaces and travel wear, great. If his strategy is we're going to become an overall wellness company and actually this is risky because maybe they won't pursue it because they were such a failure with Mirror. But I think some pure data plays actually could work. Let me show you a couple of things that I think that are interesting. There's this company Whoop. Uh, they provide that data. I think they can't build the stuff themselves at this point. Lululemon. Another one that I think that they could look at. Calm. If we look at Calm, all this tracking data around sleep and all of these things is huge these days. I'm wearing one of these Aura rings.
Yeah, I got the ring on too. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and to me that ties in nicely.
This is embedding the technology versus trying to sell the technology as like back to the mirror thing. I don't want to beat that one to death, but that was like they were trying to say this is a new product that we're going to sell. This is about embedding it into probably maybe the fabric and it becomes part of the products you're already buying. Like I believe in that, and I think the data thing is probably a huge missed opportunity with them as well. Can I give you another company? Spanx. They continually grow, they continue to innovate. Take a look at the company. So they've developed jeans, like they have all kinds. And again, it's about making someone feel a certain way. It's about and also being support, like literally supportive to people as well. Like it helps with back problems, things like that. So like that actually got me thinking like back to the travel and the plane thing. A lot of people wear like compression socks and these kinds of things on planes now. For obvious reasons around like blood clots, things like that. But I'm like, oh, that'd be really interesting if Lululemon, why couldn't they build compression things into their tights and things like that? Like that would be really interesting to add more technology within it to be medically supportive, I guess is probably the best way to do it. Right now it feels like they're just a clothing brand, like we were talking before, like a fashion brand. And I think they've lost that essence of those other things as well. So I'm going to say one more thing, and then we should get to our final thoughts and close her up. But the other thing I think is really important for them to look at is like small is the new big, particularly in retail. They have a lot of physical retail stores that they're trying to maintain. And I would argue those physical retail stores, they've lost the essence of what they originally were. Like you used to go to yoga classes on a Saturday morning. Like my wife used to tell me about, especially after she had kids, like that was her Saturday morning and that was her community that she'd go to. So I think they need to close a lot of those things down and redefine that retail experience that and truly connect with the customer again, particularly those loyal customers, and maybe go not necessarily go back to exactly let's run yoga studios, but I think they've just become like any retail store. You walk into them and it's like yeah they sell stuff. Like I can't tell the difference between your store and the next guy's store. Whereas before they didn't even care if they sold anything to you. They were happy you were just there and you were doing yoga. You know,
Yeah.
like that to me is
Yeah,
like
they
that's where
totally
you get the
lost
most.
that sort of hippie vibe, But
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. That's very true. So should we close her up and give her a
let's
final? I can give one and then you finish it off. How about I
sure.
just give one last thing? So I think the other thing, and by the way, I really agree with the proxy one, and maybe that's the one you're gonna end with again. But I really agree that that is hurting them both internally, employee, externally with shareholders, and it's just a general distraction. They need to get back to business. It's a great brand. It's a great Canadian brand, which I think they should leverage more. I do think, though, that they need to focus on a full win back strategy and they need to overcorrect. And what I mean by that is they need to get out and apologize. Apologize to their shareholders, apologize to their customers at different lenses. I'm not even talking about Chip go out there and do it. I just think they need to go, you know what? We're still doing okay, we're still doing fine, but we need to do better. And they need to publicly do this and acknowledge it. I don't think it's in Chip's DNA to say sorry and do these things, even though he's Canadian. But I think they need to win back customers. And by doing that, they need to overcorrect and come out with some real public acknowledgments that they've made some missteps. Like, especially shareholders, like they need some shareholder confidence. Call me the softy, but I think overcorrection is needed in this case. So that's my sort of final thought.
I like that. Hail back to what we also said about Jaguar too. So yeah, I hear you. I think we both know they need to get out of this proxy war. Everybody knows they need to get out of the proxy war. Chip's not going to back down, and nor do I necessarily think he should about how complacent the company's become. But I think what he needs to do is he needs to provide an alternative vision and get everyone behind that vision instead of just making it about personalities. And to me, that vision is about some big acquisitions like Whoop or Calm, maybe both, right sizing the retail footprint to your point, moving more of their sales online, and then also some of these adjacent spaces like travel wear. To me, that bundled up as an overall strategy, a really bold strategy with some numbers behind it, could be the thing that gets the company back focused on what it should be and not focused on what it's not accomplishing. Partner that with some public apology around what the fact that they've lost their way. I think that doesn't hurt, and it can also reinforce why they're doing these new strategies. And then lastly, they need some big innovation, and that's where I think they bring Chip back in some kind of role, not one that's necessarily media facing. Sorry, Chip, but let him create that sort of light tech, or that on running shoes is done. You know, like they've come up with spray on shoes, and what's Lululemon doing other than Mirror, which they bought and flubbed. That sort of sums up all the things that I see, and I think if he pursued that strategy, even that we laid out very simply here, and got people behind that as a rallying call, they could avoid a lot of this nightmare.
And just one last question. Do you think that leaning into a little more Canadiana, like their heritage, would be helpful? It just seems to be missing from any history. You don't even, I can't even find it anywhere on the website. Like you look up Chip and you do some research on him, and he talks about being an American Canadian entrepreneur, right? So, but all of his companies were formed here. They were innovative. I just feel like something's missing with that. But that's
I think if the company does it well, and like what Roots has done, like it's cutesy, then it's okay. But I think too much like nationalism these days is a no-go, especially with like the elbows up stuff. And I don't want to get into that conversation, but I just think the last thing you want to do these days is play any kind of nationalism if you can avoid it, and particularly when your biggest market is the US.
But for sure. But I just wonder, as they move into other markets, and I have no data or research to support this, but it'd be interesting. Do people perceive Lululemon as an American company or a Canadian company? And does it matter? I mean, obviously they're doing well in Asian markets, so obviously it doesn't matter. It's the quality of the product, which it should be. The quality of the product and the brand, it should have nothing to do with political borders or geopolitics. It should have nothing to do with that. We are in an environment right now where you and I both know that it is a factor. Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't want to be planting or sowing the Canadian flag. They did the Olympics a number of years ago as well, which I'm not sure how well that came off. But I do think people were surprised that, why are you picking Lululemon? I remember telling people, well, Lululemon's a Canadian company. And they're like, no, I don't think so. It's like, yeah, it is. But I agree with you. I don't think it's like, don't be waving the flag in front of people. I don't think that's helpful.
Maybe after the next election we could do it. But right now I might avoid it. But last screen share, Steve, you said you hated when people went on the plane and looked schlubby. And you and I, small teaser here, we've got a trip coming up. We're going to be doing the podcast actually from another country. I'm going to wear this on the plane. I hope you're going to be okay with that. Yeah.
Well, I haven't told you what my flight is yet, so.
Excellent episode. Thanks so much, Steve. Talk next time.